The fluorescent lights of the Chicago diner flickered as Maya wiped down the same counter for the third time that hour. Her hands were raw, cracked from years of bleach and hot water, but she kept moving. Movement meant she didn't have to think. Movement meant she could pretend her mother's words from that morning hadn't carved themselves into her chest like a dull knife. You're 28 years old, Maya. 28 and still scrubbing other people's filth. No man's ever going to want you. You're going to die alone in some studio apartment with cats you can't even afford to feed. Maya had learned long ago not to cry in public. Tears were a luxury for people who had someone to comfort them. She had the diner, the smell of burnt coffee, and the sound of the bell above the door that rang every time someone walked in expecting her to smile. The evening shift was always the worst. That's when the business crowd came in, suits pressed, watches gleaming, looking at her like she was part of the furniture. Invisible, disposable. She glanced at the clock. 7:15. Her mother would be at home now, probably on her second bottle of wine, scrolling through Facebook looking at her high school friends' wedding photos and grandchildren. Maya's younger sister had given her 2 grandchildren already. Perfect little angels with perfect little lives in perfect little suburbs. And then there was Maya, the failure, the one who'd dropped out of college when her father got sick, the one who'd stayed to take care of him while everyone else moved on with their lives, the one who'd watched him die slowly in a hospital bed while her mother blamed her for not praying hard enough. The bell rang. Maya looked up, her rehearsed smile already forming, and felt it freeze on her face. 3 men walked in. Not the usual business crowd. These men moved differently. Their suits were darker, more expensive. One had a scar running down his left cheek. Another had tattoos creeping up from his collar. But it was the third man, the one in the middle, who made the entire diner seem to shrink. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by someone who understood cruelty. His eyes swept the room with the casual assessment of a predator checking for threats. When those eyes landed on Maya, she felt her breath catch. Dante Moretti. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. You didn't work in this neighborhood without hearing the whispers. The Moretti family controlled everything from the docks to the construction contracts. They were the reason certain businesses never got robbed. They were the reason certain people disappeared. Move, she told herself. Take their order. Don't stare. She grabbed her notepad and walked over to the booth they'd chosen. The one in the back corner. The one with a clear view of both exits. Evening, gentlemen. What can I get you? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her how to hide fear behind a service industry smile. Dante Moretti looked up at her slowly, and Maya realized his eyes were an unusual shade of gray, like storm clouds over Lake Michigan. Coffee, black, and whatever pie you have that's actually fresh. His voice was deep, measured, with an edge that suggested he wasn't used to repeating himself. We have apple and cherry. The apple was baked this morning. Then apple. His eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary. What's your name? Maya felt her pulse quicken. In her world, when men like Dante Moretti asked your name, it rarely meant anything good. Maya, sir. A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, though it didn't reach his eyes. You don't have to call me sir, Maya. Dante is fine. One of the other men, the one with the scar, chuckled. Boss, you're scaring the girl. Am I scaring you, Maya? The question was direct. His eyes locked on hers. Maya knew she should lie, should say something polite and back away. But something in his gaze made her tell the truth. A little. He nodded slowly, as if appreciating her honesty. That's smart. Fear keeps people alive. She brought them their coffee and pie, acutely aware of the way the other diners had suddenly found reasons to leave. Within 10 minutes, the place was nearly empty except for Dante and his men, and old Frank in the corner who was too deaf to notice anything anyway. Maya busied herself with closing duties, trying not to think about how quiet it had gotten, trying not to notice how Dante's eyes followed her every time she moved past their booth. When they finally left, Dante placed $300 bills on the table. The pie and coffee cost $6. Keep the change, he said, his voice low. And Maya? Lock the door behind us. This neighborhood isn't safe at night for a woman alone. Then he was gone, the bell chiming softly, leaving her standing there with more money in her hand than she usually made in a week, and a warning that felt more like a promise. Maya's mother didn't believe her about the $300. You probably stole it, she said, not even looking up from her phone. That's what happens when you work in places like that. You become like them. Dishonest. Cheap. Maya had stopped trying to defend herself years ago. She folded the bills carefully and tucked them into her worn wallet, already planning how she'd stretch them across rent, utilities, and her mother's prescription medications that insurance never quite covered. The next 3 nights at the diner were uneventful. No Dante Moretti. No dark-suited men with predator eyes. Maya told herself she was relieved. Told herself that the strange flutter in her chest every time the bell rang was just anxiety, not disappointment. On Thursday, her mother had one of her episodes. Maya came home after her shift to find the apartment door wide open. Her mother standing in the hallway in her nightgown, screaming at Mrs. Patterson from 3B about stolen mail that had never existed. The neighbors watched from cracked doorways, judging, whispering. Maya saw it in their eyes. The pity mixed with contempt. That poor girl. Stuck with that drunk mess of a mother. Mom, Maya said softly, guiding her back inside. Let's go to bed. Her mother yanked her arm away with surprising strength. Don't touch me. This is your fault. Everything is your fault. Your father would still be alive if you'd been a better daughter. If you'd been worth staying alive for. The words hit like they always did. Sharp. Precise. Finding all the soft places Maya had never learned to protect. She got her mother to bed, cleaned up the broken glass in the kitchen from whatever her mother had thrown earlier, and sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the tub, finally letting herself cry. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Mom called me again. Said you're stealing from her. Maya, I can't keep doing this. Maybe it's time to look into facilities. Facilities meant nursing homes. Meant abandoning the woman who'd raised her, no matter how cruel she'd become. Maya typed and deleted 3 responses before giving up and turning off her phone. The next night at work, Mr. Kowalski came in. He owned the pawn shop 2 blocks down and always smelled like cigar smoke and cheap cologne. He sat at the counter, too close, his eyes traveling over Maya in a way that made her skin crawl. You know, Maya, he said, stirring sugar into coffee he wouldn't drink. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be wasting her time in a place like this. I could use someone at my shop. The pay's better. And I take care of my employees real good. His hand landed on hers. Heavy. Possessive. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski, but I'm fine here. His grip tightened. I wasn't really asking, sweetheart. The bell above the door chimed. Maya felt Mr. Kowalski's hand release hers so quickly she almost stumbled backward. She looked up and her heart stopped. Dante Moretti stood in the doorway, his gray eyes sweeping the empty diner before settling on Mr. Kowalski with an expression that could freeze blood. Kowalski, Dante said quietly, didn't realize you frequented this establishment. Mr. Kowalski had gone pale, beads of sweat forming on his upper lip. Mr. Moretti, I was just having some coffee. Were you? Dante walked slowly toward the counter, each step deliberate. Because from where I was standing outside, it looked like you were putting your hands on someone who didn't want to be touched. It was nothing, just friendly conversation. Dante reached the counter and leaned against it casually, but there was nothing casual about the way his jaw tightened. In my experience, Kowalski, when a woman pulls her hand away, the conversation stops being friendly. Mr. Kowalski stood up so fast his stool scraped loudly against the linoleum. I should go. Early morning tomorrow. Yes, you should. And Kowalski? Dante's voice dropped lower. If I hear you've been back here bothering Maya again, we're going to have a very different conversation. The kind that happens in places without witnesses. Mr. Kowalski practically ran out of the diner. Maya stood frozen behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't sure if she should thank him or be terrified that Dante Moretti now knew her name and apparently had been standing outside watching. You all right? Dante asked, his voice softer now. Yes. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Actually, I did. He sat down at the counter where Kowalski had been, as if erasing the other man's presence. Men like him think they can take what they want because nobody stops them. Someone should have stopped him a long time ago. Maya poured him coffee without asking, her hands steadier now. Why were you outside? Dante smiled slightly, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Making sure you locked the door like I told you to. You didn't. I forgot. He took a sip of coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. You forget a lot of things that keep you safe? Maya felt something shift in the air between them. Something dangerous and magnetic that she didn't know how to name. If you're wondering what happens next in Maya's story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Because what Dante Moretti does next changes everything. Maya wiped down the counter, aware of his eyes on her. I'm careful enough. Careful enough isn't careful. This neighborhood, the people in it, they see someone like you and think easy target. Soft. Vulnerable. And what do you see? His gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Someone who's been fighting alone for too long. Dante started coming to the diner every night. Not for the coffee, which he barely touched. Not for the pie, which sat untouched on his plate. He came, Maya realized, with a mixture of terror and something she didn't want to name. For her. He never said it directly. Never crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But his presence became a shield. Word spread fast in their neighborhood. The Moretti boss had taken an interest in the diner girl. Suddenly, the men who used to leer at her found reasons to look away. The customers who never tipped started leaving 20s. Her manager, who'd ignored her requests for safer closing shifts for 2 years, suddenly scheduled her for daylight hours only. Your boyfriend's got the whole block scared. Her coworker Jennifer whispered one afternoon. You know what he is, right? What he does. Maya knew. Everyone knew. But when she went home to her mother's venom and her sister's distance and an apartment that felt more like a prison than a home, she also knew that Dante's dark eyes held something nobody else had ever offered her. Protection. Recognition. The acknowledgement that she existed as more than a ghost serving coffee. 3 weeks after Mr. Kowalski fled the diner, Maya's mother crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Maya came home to find her collapsed on the kitchen floor, an empty bottle of pills beside her. Not quite enough to kill her, just enough to punish her daughter one more time. The hospital, the stomach pumping, the psychiatric evaluation, the social worker with kind eyes and hard questions. Maya sat in the waiting room at 3 in the morning, still wearing her diner uniform, and felt something inside her finally break. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. I heard what happened. Where are you? She stared at the text. She'd never given Dante her number. But of course he had it. Men like him had access to everything. St. Michael's Hospital. She didn't know why she answered. Didn't know why, when he appeared 40 minutes later in that expensive dark suit. She stood up and walked straight into his arms. He didn't ask questions. Didn't offer empty platitudes. He just held her while she shattered, his hands steady against her back, his heartbeat solid beneath her ear. When she finally pulled away, mascara stained and exhausted, he cupped her face in his hands. You're not doing this alone anymore, he said quietly. I don't care what you think you owe her. I don't care about blood or obligation. You matter, Maya, and I protect what matters to me. I can't afford to matter to you. Do you understand what you are? What people will think. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I've been called a monster my entire life. Let them talk. But you're going to be the most protected woman in this city. Maya's mother was transferred to a private facility in Oak Park 3 days later. The kind with gardens and therapy sessions and staff who actually cared. The kind Maya could never have afforded in 3 lifetimes of serving coffee. Dante handled everything with quiet efficiency. No drama. No demands for gratitude. Just results. You didn't have to do this, Maya said when he picked her up from her shift that Friday. The diner felt different now. Lighter. Her manager had already told her she could take time off if she needed it. Another miracle courtesy of Dante Moretti's invisible hand. Yes, I did. He opened the car door for her, his hand settling on the small of her back as she slid into the passenger seat. His touch was becoming familiar now. Expected. Wanted. They didn't go to her apartment. Instead, Dante drove to a penthouse overlooking the Chicago River. All floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than Maya had earned in her entire life. "This is where you live?" she asked, walking to the windows and staring out at the city lights reflecting off the dark water. "Sometimes. Other times I stay at the family estate in Lake Forest." He came up behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "But I wanted you to see this. Wanted you to understand something." "What?" He turned her gently to face him, his gray eyes intense in the dim light. "That your mother was wrong. You're not going to die alone in some studio apartment. You're not going to spend the rest of your life invisible, serving people who don't even see you." "Dante, I don't know what you expect from me." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline with unexpected gentleness. "I expect you to let yourself be happy, to stop carrying guilt that was never yours to carry, to understand that strength isn't just about surviving. Sometimes it's about accepting that you deserve more. And what if people come after you because of me? What if I become a weakness?" He smiled, and it was almost tender. "Maya, anyone who thinks you're my weakness has already made a fatal mistake. You're my reason to be more careful, more strategic, more dangerous." His lips brushed her forehead. "Nobody touches what's mine. I'm not a possession. No, you're a choice. My choice. And I'm asking you to choose me back." Maya had spent 28 years being small, being invisible, being the daughter who wasn't enough, the sister who embarrassed the family, the waitress nobody remembered 5 minutes after she'd refilled their coffee. But in Dante's eyes, she saw something different. She saw herself as powerful, protected, precious. She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was a claim, a declaration, a choice. When they finally pulled apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "Welcome home, Maya." And for the first time in her life, she believed she had won. 2 years later, Maya stood on the balcony of their Lake Forest estate, watching the sun set over the perfectly manicured gardens. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming roses from the greenhouse Dante had built for her birthday. She barely recognized the woman she'd been. The girl who'd believed her mother's poison. The waitress who'd made herself invisible just to survive. Maya had gone back to school. Business management. Dante had encouraged it, had insisted actually, saying that if she was going to help him legitimize parts of the family enterprises, she needed the credentials to make people listen. She graduated top of her class last month. Her sister had come to the ceremony. They were rebuilding something fragile but real. Her mother was still at the facility in Oak Park. Sober now. Medicated. Going to therapy. Maya visited once a month, and sometimes her mother was lucid enough to apologize. Sometimes she wasn't. Maya had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to let the past poison her future. The sound of the door opening made her turn. Dante walked out onto the balcony, loosening his tie, looking tired but content. He'd been in meetings all day with lawyers and accountants. The Moretti family was slowly, carefully, moving into legitimate business. Construction, real estate development, import-export companies that actually imported and exported legal goods. It was a long process, dangerous. There were people in the old organization who resisted change. But Dante had something now he'd never had before. A reason to build something that wouldn't eventually destroy him. "How was your day?" he asked, pulling her against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "Good. I met with the architect about the community center. We're breaking ground next month." The community center had been Maya's idea. A place in their old neighborhood where kids could go after school, where single mothers could find resources, where people like she'd been could find hope instead of just survival. Dante had written the check without hesitation. "You're changing the world, Mrs. Moretti," he murmured against her hair. Mrs. Moretti. She still wasn't used to it. The wedding had been small, intimate, just family and a few trusted friends. Her sister had been maid of honor. Even her mother had been there, clear-eyed and sober, crying quietly in the front row. "We're changing it together," Maya corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "You gave me a chance to become who I was supposed to be." No. His gray eyes, still intense but softer now, held hers. "You always were this person. I just made sure the world stopped trying to destroy you long enough for you to prove it." Thank you for watching Maya's story until the very end. If this journey moved you, please hit that like button, leave a comment telling me what you thought, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about people who refuse to let the world define them. What kind of story should I tell next? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, remember that sometimes the person who saves you is the one everyone else fears.